The morning of December 17, 1944, was cold and still outside the small Belgian town of WWII. A gray mist rolled low over the frozen earth, and the world seemed suspended between night and dawn. Along a lonely road, a U.S. Army Jeep crawled toward a checkpoint, its tires crunching on the thin layer of frost. The military policeman stepped forward, his breath turning to smoke in the icy air. Inside the Jeep sat 3 men in American uniforms, their jackets crisp, their insignia correct, their accents nearly perfect. Yet something in their eyes made Sergeant William Creel hesitate. For days, rumors had whispered through the Allied lines, rumors of an invisible enemy wearing familiar faces. German commandos, they said, were moving among them disguised as Americans, spreading chaos from within. Creel's instincts sharpened. He asked for the password. The men froze. One of them muttered something, but their words cracked like brittle glass. Then Creel noticed their weapons, not American M1s but British Sten guns. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. Within minutes, the 3 men were under arrest. Beneath their olive-drab jackets were German field gray uniforms. Their names, Manfred Peruse, Gunter Billing, and Wilhelm Schmidt, would soon become infamous as the first captured infiltrators of Operation Greif, the most audacious deception of the entire war. Their arrest sent shockwaves through the Allied ranks. Soldiers began to question every familiar face. The paranoia spread faster than the fog that morning. But to understand how those 3 men ended up on that frozen road, we must go back to the heart of the German war machine, to a meeting that took place weeks earlier, deep inside Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. It was October 22, 1944. The tide of war had turned. Germany was retreating on all fronts. In his underground bunker, Adolf Hitler summoned SS Commando Otto Skorzeny, a man already half myth, half legend. Skorzeny was the daring officer who had led the glider assault that rescued Benito Mussolini from his mountain prison. He was bold, cunning, and loyal, exactly the kind of man Hitler needed for what he called his Ardennes counteroffensive. Hitler's plan was desperate but brilliant in its simplicity. Strike through the Ardennes, split the Allied armies, and recapture the key bridges along the Meuse River before the Allies could destroy them. It would be a final roll of the dice, a surprise winter offensive that might change the course of the war. But surprise alone wasn't enough. Hitler wanted confusion. He wanted chaos. And for that, he needed deception. He turned to Skorzeny and gave him an impossible order: form a unit that would dress, speak, and act like American soldiers, then infiltrate Allied lines to mislead, sabotage, and spread fear. The mission would be called Operation Greif or Griffin. Skorzeny listened in silence. Even for him, the order was dangerous. Under international law, any soldier captured fighting in enemy uniform could be executed as a spy, but Hitler dismissed his concerns. "You will change before you fight," he said coldly. "It is not dishonor. It is war." Within days, Skorzeny began assembling his new formation, Panzer Brigade 150. He called for 3,000 men fluent in English. What he received was almost laughable. Out of 2,500 recruits, only 10 could speak English fluently. A few could manage small talk. The rest barely knew enough to say yes, no, and sorry, yet. These men would soon be impersonating American soldiers. Skorzeny ordered crash courses in American culture. His men studied everything: Hollywood movies, baseball teams, slang, even how to chew gum like a GI. They practiced walking with a slouch, learned how to curse like Americans, and memorized state capitals and the names of movie stars. They spent hours watching captured U.S. films, studying every gesture, every habit. Their mission was not to fight, but to become the enemy. Their equipment problems were just as absurd. Skorzeny asked for American Jeeps, Shermans, and uniforms. What he got instead were German Panthers painted olive drab with crude white stars. From a distance, they might fool a nervous soldier in fog, but up close, they were unmistakably German. Authentic American uniforms were so scarce that only a few small teams received them. Some were torn, others stained with blood from fallen GIs. Still, the commandos pressed on, determined to play their roles convincingly. By mid-December, everything was ready. Operation Greif would begin alongside the massive German offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. At dawn on December 16th, The quiet woods exploded. Artillery thundered, tanks rolled, and 200,000 German soldiers poured through the fog-covered forests. The surprise was complete. American lines buckled. Amid that chaos, Skorzny's disguised commandos slipped through the gaps, driving captured jeeps with white stars painted on the hoods. They waved to American sentries past checkpoints and disappeared behind the front. Some changed road signs to send Allied convoys the wrong way. Others spread false orders or redirected entire battalions. A few sabotaged communications lines. For a time, the deception worked perfectly. One team even redirected an entire American convoy down a dead-end road. Another planted fake orders that delayed reinforcements. Bridges were blown, telephones cut, chaos spreading like wildfire. But by December 17th, the plan began to unravel. The main German advance had slowed, and the disguised teams were stranded deep in enemy territory. That's when Sergeant Kriel's checkpoint caught the first infiltrators, and everything changed. The news raced through Allied command. German spies in American uniforms. No one could be trusted. Soldiers started checking each other's papers, questioning accents, even testing knowledge. It wasn't long before suspicion turned into paranoia. At every roadblock, military police invented tests to prove who was truly American. They asked questions only a native would know. What's the capital of Illinois? Who won the World Series in 1940? Who's Mickey Mouse's girlfriend? And if you hesitated, you were arrested. The results were chaotic and sometimes tragic. General Omar Bradley himself was detained because an MP didn't believe Springfield was the capital of Illinois. British officers were stopped for not knowing baseball teams. Convoys were halted for hours as guards quizzed drivers about Hollywood stars. The entire Allied rear area became a maze of fear and confusion. Meanwhile, the captured Germans confessed under interrogation. They admitted that their ultimate goal had been to capture the Meuse bridges, and in that, their leader was the infamous Otto Skorzeny. But one prisoner, desperate to save his life, lied. He claimed that Skorzny's real mission was to assassinate General Eisenhower himself. That lie ignited a new panic. Within hours, the Supreme Allied Commander was placed under virtual house arrest in his headquarters at Versailles. Armed guards surrounded the building. Eisenhower, one of the most powerful men in the world, was now trapped not by the enemy but by his own men's fear. Across Belgium and northern France, checkpoints multiplied. Trucks piled up on roads, reinforcements delayed, orders lost. For days, the Allies were paralyzed by the ghost of Skorzny's invisible army. Yet in reality, Operation Greif was already collapsing. Most of the disguised commandos had been caught or killed. Without the speed of the main offensive, their sabotage had little effect. The bridges stood. The Allies regrouped. The German advance slowed, then stopped. By December 21st, the first trials began. The three men captured at Ewa, Perouse, Billing, and Schmidt, stood before a military court accused of fighting in enemy uniform. The verdict was swift. They were guilty and sentenced to death. On December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas, they were blindfolded and shot by firing squad. 13 more followed in the coming weeks. Operation Greif was over. Skorzny survived the fighting, wounded but alive. He surrendered in May 1945 and was later tried as a war criminal. The charge was clear, ordering his men to wear enemy uniforms. Yet during the 1947 trial, a surprise witness appeared, a British commando who admitted that the Allies had used similar tactics during the war. The court ruled that wearing enemy uniforms for infiltration, not combat, did not violate the laws of war. Skorzny was acquitted. His men, already dead, could not appeal. Though the operation failed, militarily, it captured no bridges and changed no outcome. Its psychological impact was profound. Operation Greif had achieved something far more powerful than sabotage. It had shattered trust. It turned every soldier into both suspect and interrogator. For weeks, the Allied army lived in fear of its own reflection. The paranoia lingered long after the snow melted. It became legend in the trivia questions, the baseball tests, the constant suspicion that the man beside you might not be who he seemed. Churchill would later call the Battle of the Bulge the greatest American battle of the war. But hidden beneath that victory was a story of deception, a reminder that in war, identity itself can become a weapon. Skorzny's operation had shown how fragile trust could be. how easily an army could be made to doubt its own men. Yet it also revealed something deeper, that being American wasn't just about uniforms or accents. It was about culture, the shared language of jokes, baseball, music, and movies, the rhythm of speech and the small, lived details no enemy could ever fake. And so, when Sergeant Creel stood in the cold that December morning and demanded a password, he wasn't just following orders. He was drawing a line between truth and deception, between imitation and identity. The hesitation he heard wasn't just a linguistic slip, it was history itself catching its breath. That moment, that pause, ended the illusion. The fog began to lift. The light broke through. And the war, and in all its chaos and human frailty, marched on.